Cushing's Bookshelf, episode 23, Dreams of Fear, Poetry of Terror and the Supernatural, edited by S.T. Joshi and Stephen J. Mariconda. And welcome back to Cushing's Bookshelf. I am Nicole Cushing. This is my bookshelf. And so without any further ado, let's go ahead and reach back and pick out this week's book. So, this is Dreams of Fear, as I mentioned, published by Hippocampus Press, as you can see there, in this trade paperback edition. And I want to say just a word about the cover. Like a lot of Hippocampus books from maybe 5 or 10 years ago, this is not necessarily the most impressive visual representation for a cover illustration. I'm not sure, there's a tree and there's glowy things around there. And a bunch of trees and a bunch of like glowy things and wind or whatever. But it's not necessarily the strongest cover, but to Hippocampus's credit, they have been getting stronger and stronger covers in the last year or so that I've noticed. And I also would say just, don't let this distract you from a good book, because there is really good stuff inside once you get beyond the cover. So what do we find inside of here? We find poems starting all the way back I guess the earliest is an excerpt from Homer's The Odyssey, circa 750 BCE, going all the way up to authors, or rather poets, who we may have interacted with online in our present day. Lee Blackmore, for example, is in here, as well as Anne K. Schwader, and the recently departed Willem Pugmire also has a poem in here. And I get a little emotional sometimes thinking about the fact that Willem is not with us anymore, because he was just a cool online presence. And I met him in person once, and we chatted for about 15 minutes at a convention. But I miss you, Willem. And so he's here. He lives on. And not just this, but of course many other books. But so what I enjoy about this is the inclusion of all kinds of authors who you would not necessarily think of as horror authors. There's a poem in here from Lord Byron. There's a poem in here from I think Goethe has a poem in here. I think we have Robert Graves has a poem in here. So there are mainstream authors who are represented here, and I think that's all for the good, because it really emphasizes the idea that the weird is just a mode of literary expression, and that it's not like this kind of anti-literary thing that's kind of shoved off in the corner, going through its gesticulations. It's a legitimate mode of literary expression, and this helps to highlight this. And it highlights that weird poetry, horror poetry, is something that the finest practitioners of the written word have sampled, have tried out from time to time. On a personal note, it's interesting. I live in southern Indiana, not far at all from the border with Kentucky. And Louisville, Kentucky is, just probably 10 minutes from my house. And there is a poet here from the late 19th century, early 20th century, named Madison, either Cawein or Cowan. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. It's Cawein. So I'm not sure, like I said, how that's pronounced, but he was from that area around Louisville and was quite popular in the 19th century, I guess, early 20th century, and is virtually unknown now. But he's buried in one of the more prestigious cemeteries in Louisville, a place called Cave Hill. So I'm going to have to visit his grave at some point in the future and just express my appreciation, right? Because I liked his poem. There's a Halloween poem in here that I really dig that he wrote. So, yeah, think of this as like a starter kit for appreciating weird poetry, horror poetry, etc. And it's just a starter kit. It's not without its limitations. I would, ideally, I think that there'd be more stuff in translation here, because I'm sure there's been all kinds of great horror and weird poetry from, areas of Central Europe, areas of Asia, Africa, etc. And we don't have that here. But still, this is valuable. So let's hope to see more translated horror poetry in the future. But in the meantime, this is a great first step as far as appreciating this stuff. So that's my book for the week. Take care, and I will see you next week.